Welcome to On The Recyard, Women's Prison Podcast, where we are live on the... Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday night, and we are live on The Recyard, Women's Prison Podcast. I'm Marci Marie.
I'm Toonche. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Honey, this logged me out, and then it was a nightmare trying to get into the studio tonight.
I want to tell you, Toonche,
All right.
Some professional podcasters, especially when they're doing like a live show, like we like to really be in the streets with our community. We like to be live, but they often will like come into this virtual studio that we have and do things like sound check, mic, camera check. We have a guest tonight, and he and I were just big chilling. We've been big chilling in the studio here.
Well, then somebody was here.
Somebody was here. We have a great conversation tonight. We are talking about all things Texas parole. This is probably one of the most asked about subjects in Toonche and I's DMs. People want to know, how does my loved one make parole? People want to know, can I get off parole earlier? People want to know, my PO told me this, is this allowed? And we're going to do our best to answer some of those questions for you. And we're going to give you some big information about advocacy work that's being done around parole in Texas and trying to really improve the parole process. And we're doing it all with one of our most favorite people on the planet. Justin Martinez is here, and he is a policy genius. He is a beautiful soul who knows a lot about parole and happens to co-lead a parole working group, an unnamed Texas parole working group. And we have some things going on. Toon and I are both a part of that parole working group. And so we're going to also give you some details about that and some of the goals that we have for that group and some of the events we have coming up that you can participate in.
That's right. I'm really excited for us to start talking about this collective effort in the state of Texas to work on parole issues. I don't think that we've had this type of cohesive collective to begin doing that. But yeah, all things parole. And I'm ready for you to hit that button so we can go on to what happened this week.
Hey.
Well done, ma'am. That was really impressive.
Right on time. I was listening for my cue.
That was great. Man, we've come a long ways to finally get that right. What'd you do this past week?
I don't know, honey. I don't even know what I did this afternoon. Listen, I've been working a lot. I worked a lot on ledge stuff, on working on a bill tracker for Lioness. And I've spent a lot of time on that website today. But I can't even remember. I don't know. I haven't a clue. Now, you've been at the Capitol.
Yeah, well, did we talk about that? When did me and Mandy go to that Senate finance hearing? We did that last week.
Well, honey, I don't know what you did this week either.
If you don't know what you did, I don't know what I did either.
I am going to Austin tomorrow. And I'm bringing my honey with me.
That's right, you are. That's right. Honey, I did go to that Senate finance hearing sometime last week. Sure did. Yeah. It was interesting. Just talking about what is the community, where does the community think that millions of dollars should go? Not to reopen prisons, for sure. But I want to bring up something really important that happened. First of all, the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl.
Taylor's boyfriend
made it again. And then Taylor was a maniac at the Grammys. She gave the award to Beyonce. She was dancing, having a good time, and being the supportive queen that she is.
Hey, when there's two key moments that happen at the Grammys for Taylor Swift, or three. Okay, first of all, she did that great whatever that was in that red dress, and this isn't Entertainment Network, but we do love Taylor. So she did this turn thing
Mm.
and so that's all over the internet. But the
Mm.
other thing she did is when Sabrina Carpenter won, Taylor Swift was so excited that tears came to her eyes. She was so happy. Honey, that's how I would be for you if you won something really cool like that.
Hey, let me tell you something. Yeah, you would be. But
Yeah.
then you'd also find a way to
Oh, yeah, I'd knock you down
catch,
right after.
yeah, like you'd be so excited, and then you would literally push me back on the way to my seat.
Yeah, and then I'd tell you, "Why did you go up there with that hat on?" Or something like that, because I have to put you back in your spot.
That's right. That's the language of love for all of us, really.
The other thing Taylor did was during Kendrick Lamar when she was a dancing maniac, and she is all over TikTok for it. Every one of my favorite creators that are non-criminal justice creators, because those are my favorite, right? But all of my favorite entertainment ones are like everybody, it'll be the caption like everybody at the Grammys during They Not Like Us. And they're like, just kind of jamming a little bit. And then it goes, bam, Taylor Swift during, and she's just getting it and getting it. And she just protrudes joy. And I needed to see all of that. I needed that, Taylor. Thank you, Taylor. January's been long, honey, and I needed to see you just really having fun.
Amen.
We got to get Justin on here. I told him it would be just a minute. And also, y'all, I don't know how I didn't know you didn't start with the chat right away, but I see y'all coming in. I see you in the chat. So excited to see y'all. Hi, Laurie. Hi, Tina. I'm so glad you're here on the live too. Welcome. AIC's advocate is here and always reminds us to remind you, please hit that like button. If you're watching on your cell phone, tap, tap, tap that screen, share the live, leave comments, all of that good stuff. If you're listening later, wherever you hear your favorite podcasters, please leave us a review. That really helps our podcast reach an even broader audience. Maggie, glad you caught us live as well. So happy. Lori, thanks for the reminder. Thumbs up, everybody. Our good friend Jerry is here. And how did my mama Sean know that? How did she know your birthday's coming up?
Because she loves me.
She does
And
love you. This is true. This is
I
true.
also want to just tell everybody, Marci usually does go straight to the chat right when we get started, but she was a little fresh irritated that I rolled scootabooed right on in
5
at
seconds
2 minutes.
before we went live. When we have a guest here, that's hugely embarrassing. Let's get our guest in here.
They're going to love him.
Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, everyone. By the way, Jen, I loved when Marci mentioned you're at the Capitol and that sigh that she gave. I feel like just perfectly sums up.
Yeah. Justin was with us all day.
And, yes, I was at that finance committee meeting that was on last Monday, I think. Yeah. Some interesting conversations happening.
Your video quality is really nice. That's that office Wi-Fi, I think. And so it's now, had I known you were at the office, I might have just went up there after I have this very long, intensive work retreat at my other workspace. And we weren't at our office. We were actually somewhere else doing our meetings. And I would have just came up there. And then I wouldn't have been late, Marci. So,
and that would have been lovely. I want for Justin to give an introduction because I didn't read a bio for you, and we know you and we love you, but just could you give just like a quick introduction?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, I'm super excited to be here. My name is Justin Martinez. I'm currently working with Latino Justice as their Southwest Regional Coordinator. I just started that job in December. Before that, I was with the Texas Center for Justice and Equity. But yeah, like I guess, I got started in this work through my own system involvement, right? That sort of kind of peeled back the curtain as to sort of what our criminal punishment system does and looks like here in the States. And once I saw it, I couldn't put it down. And so I decided how to get involved and found myself in the policy advocacy space with, of course, these two beautiful people and many others. And um, here to mess some shit up, cause some disruption. So yeah, happy to be here.
Love it. Making good trouble.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yes.
you can also use some profanity if you want. I do it freely.
I had really had to censor my because the other word was going to come out, but then I was like, I don't know I don't know the crowd. So
we allow a little of that when it comes naturally. Jen sometimes goes overboard, and we have like this private
You're-
chat here, and I have to get on to her.
You're full of shit.
Mostly, I don't want to be, I don't want to limit our audience because of that. And then also, I don't want for YouTube to say, y'all can't do that, which I think there's more going on YouTube than us.
Probably, yeah.
So we are talking about Texas parole, and I had mentioned that we are all part of a Texas parole working group that may come up with a jazzier name before too long. And can you just talk a little bit about how that started, and how that came to you?
Yeah, and we definitely do need to come up with the jazzier name for sure. Yeah, but I mean that really came about. So I mean, geez, we had conversations with folks from the National Parole Transformation Project, which, damn, I mean, I like y'all, I really can't even remember what I did today. I think those started like fall of, is it 2023? 2024. I don't remember. It was fairly recent, right? Where a National Parole Transformation Project came in and we're like, hey, Texas is the parole system is let's talk about it, right? And so from that, we had a number of teach-ins that actually you can find on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you can find those. But we had a couple of teach-ins that sort of focused on like just the parole process in general and what that looks like. Talked about the challenges and issues, also talked about like what are some advocacy efforts around parole and things like that. And I think it was after that last parole teach-in we did, when we were debriefing, we were kind of like, man, maybe we should form like an intentional space where we gather folks to talk about parole, because despite parole being such a huge and critical part of the criminal legal system, I don't think it gets the attention it needs. And so then we were sort of like, well, let's get a group going. And so some of us kind of co-led on trying to gather some folks, which we've called for the Texas Parole Working Group, which again, we definitely need to come up with a better name. But I mean, essentially there was a number of goals, but really the big goal around the group was just to form a space where we could start talking about parole. And getting a better idea of the landscape, who's doing what, where are the gaps, maybe where are some areas that we need to focus on more, particularly on like how, like maybe pushing some of the efforts that maybe are ongoing or maybe that are not, and kind of figuring out what we need to do to really sort of have a parole system that at least functions a little bit more in the way it's intended to. So that's how that space has been forming. And we've been having some good conversations since. So
and thank you so much, Justin, for you and the other folks that kind of got the ball rolling and held it together and maintained it as we figured out, more collectively how we wanted to make this a growing, I don't want to use the word campaign, but like movement around parole that I think many advocates that have come before us and, have done some really hard and important work. It's just not always been, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I think it's been kind of siloed and unintentionally, right? Which a lot of the work happens to happen like that. But like just a real coalition, base building around parole, because it affects so many people. So I appreciate your leadership in helping get that started.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Mhm. So what do y'all feel? Let's say y'all. What do y'all feel is the most important? If you had to sum up the issue, the problem with parole, even probation, supervision, um, in Texas, let's just use Texas, the overall issue, how would you sum it up?
There are a plethora of issues with the supervision, with making parole if you're in prison or being on supervision, whether it's parole or probation. I feel like that's a open-ended question. But I'll say just directly for me, and before I answer that, I want to let our community here that's watching live feel free to put your questions in the comment section. And just like always, if I don't get to it right when you ask, I promise I'll get to it before the end of the show, because for sure we want to give you the information that you're looking for. But for me personally, my issue, or the worst part of parole, was not knowing what the parole board wanted while I was in prison, and doing everything that I thought and what my peers were kind of guiding me to do, and not making parole over and over and over and over for the same exact reason, which was a reason beyond that I couldn't change. It was because of my crime. And then the supervision side would be the insane stipulations that I had when I got out, completely unmanageable in today's world. And of course, we're find a way, make a way kind of folks, but when it comes to finances, a lot of people don't have somebody that you can trust that would give you their bank account number to get like a payroll check deposited in. And that's what kind of situation I was in. So
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah. Right. I mean, man, so many thoughts. I mean, I think parole process itself. I mean, I think parole in and of itself is the problem. I think, right. I think inherently there are things that are just baked within parole that, I mean, we can try and do our best to tweak and get the outcomes we want, but parole itself is the problem, right? I mean, I think for the tens of thousands of people who go through parole every year, they're going through a very dehumanizing process. They're going through a very highly subjective process, and a process that likes to think it gives people meaningful opportunities at release, but really doesn't, right? And to Marci's point, loves to dress itself in like this quasi judicial like resentencing court, when like that's not y'all's business, right?
right.
The court did its thing. That's not y'all's business. That y'all's business is figuring out who this person is now, what they have done since being incarcerated, um, not rehashing the sentence or the crime of conviction, and things like that. I mean, I think if there was one thing that I'm really passionate about, and I think really needs to change, if we're gonna have something that looks like it's somewhat fair and just, discretion, right?
Yeah.
The power of the parole board and their ability to essentially do, right, whatever they want, base their decisions off of whatever they want, right? I mean, I think any type of meaningful change really needs to at least start thinking about how do we move around changing the parole board's discretion and narrowing that to where they can't deny people solely based off of factors that the person cannot change and has also been litigated. The court's already heard it. They've already been assessed a punishment. That punishment came with a sentence. Boom, right? We're done. You know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the heart of the problem, right? Is this discretion, this feeling of resentencing and things out of our control. And when we talk about parole to the community and legislators and policymakers, they really think that parole is like it is on TV or in the movies, where if I do well and I don't break the rules and I'm remorseful and I do all the things, then I am released. And it really is more of like, at least Shawshank Redemption does kind of capture this, where it's like these people are asking some. Now we don't have in-person parole hearings like that, but it is this sense of, well, it really don't matter what you say. There is this wide discretion that it is really about your offense, and like you said, relitigating that. And to Marci's point about once you actually make parole and you're on supervision, those goddamn ankle monitors. If there's something that's going to plague me for the rest of my life that is a burr under my saddle with an infection in it, is those GPS ankle monitors, super intensive, writing out schedules, all the obstacles and barriers that you can imagine, and you being held accountable to some equipment that they don't even track. Parole, at least, the equipment they use is not even tracking when those things are the equipment's fault. So yeah, that's what I would say is the most pressing things.
Monitor has to be at the top of the list, because we have people getting rearrested, and then last legislative session, a law was passed making it a felony in Texas for you to tamper with your GPS monitoring system. However, when the expert witness was testifying in front of the legislators, he admitted that they do not track, that they don't have a way to tell for sure if the monitor was tampered with or if it was an error. And we know those GPSs, how many of y'all have been driving in your car and your GPS goes out for a minute? That's what happens to those monitors. Or if you go into like you work in a warehouse, we have lots of Linus members that work in warehouses and their GPS goes off, and they're working in a warehouse where their policy is not to have their phone on them. So now they're like breaking their rules at work because they know their monitor's going to go out and parole's going to call and they're going to have to step outside. So they're risking their job because, I mean, it's just wild. Yeah, for sure.
It's wild. And those ankle monitors are different depending on if it's the company and the equipment that parole is using versus probation uses other different types of monitoring equipment. And then, even recently, Mandy explaining to me that, well, girl, the monitors that they use for like while you're out on bail, right? Like trial stuff is totally different. It doesn't operate the way the parole monitors were. And it's like, oh my God. I remember at the conference, Marci, when we were there with Mandy and Brother Rob and some folks, the big parole conference, that they were talking about supervision as a way to actually feed the carceral system, not release. And I'm wondering if, Justin, you can kind of explain that more to folks about this is actually not what even the public is really taught that this is in terms of public safety.
Yeah. Abolish parole supervision. There is just, I mean, it's wild to think how much time, energy, and resources we put into trying to control, right? The need for control, right? And surveilling, when, like, what would that look like if we put that same time of energy and resources into making sure that people have stable housing, that they have employment, that their basic needs are being met, right? That's an indicator of a person's success, particularly success on reentry. Not a stupid ankle monitor, and quite frankly, parole either. Granted, I'm sure there's individuals, parole officers, who would like to do a lot, who can't. I'm not on parole, I'm on probation. And I remember one time when I got put on probation, I got into this super big housing crisis where all of a sudden I was gonna have to find new housing. Um, and my probation officer was like, you could tell she was like, this is stupid. And she had nothing to give me, nothing to offer me.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Um, so, I mean, and I think so when we're talking about supervision, and especially when we're talking about all of these conditions that people have, right, that they have to follow, while also trying to, I mean, I can only imagine what it's like being incarcerated, right? Especially if we're talking about for years or decades, right? And now you step into what probably is a whole new world, right? I mean, and here you are trying to navigate just your life on top of having this monkey on your back that's telling you to not do any of these things, right? And if you do, right, there's always the threat of being revoked, right? And none of that's helpful. None of that's helpful. I mean, I don't have like the exact numbers, but I do know there are probably at least a good number of folks who are in TDCJ right now, or if not in TDCJ, because y'all, Texas loves to be sneaky. And we have these things called intermediate sanctioned facilities and things like that, where you may technically not be revoked, but if it looks like a prison, it's a prison, you're being revoked, you're taken out of your community, it is revocation. But because you're not technically reincarcerated in a TDCJ, it doesn't get counted in the overall numbers. So that could be like a whole different thing too, right? But we do know that parole supervision oftentimes just feeds the system itself. Um, and in many cases doesn't really offer people the support that they need, right? And it's just sort of something else that people have to figure out how to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm just thinking of Marci, talking about all the barriers that you faced. Like, what would have been more helpful? That you experienced on parole. Wait, and let's not forget, like, all the ways that you were denied over and over with this. You've talked before about what that did to your mental health, but like, what did the things you experience on parole help your reentry journey or hinder and hurt it?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, not having a checking account, savings account, debit card, credit card, no, that was a huge barrier. And I was someone who came home on parole with quite a bit of privilege. So I have family members that own homes that have invited me to stay. I have family members that they all have vehicles and are very willing to take me to the parole office, which was 30 miles from home. And just even with all of that, it was a huge struggle. And frankly, I could have been really sneaky. I mean, I could have. It almost encourages criminal activity, because had I not had family that I could completely trust with my paycheck, and that they could felt that they could trust me, someone with a financial crime, with their bank account numbers. I mean, we had to do that because businesses don't pay often. They want to give you a debit card, or they want to give you, so I did that. And then I would have a job that paid me on a debit card, and one parole officer would say yes, and then I would get a new one and they would say no.
Mm-hmm.
you know and then I mean, and there's no consistency across the board, not even within the office. I've had about 7 parole officers now. They all operate differently. Some want 14 days for travel pass, some want 2. um, and I want to get to this question because I was denied parole 5 or 6 times, and I can't believe I don't know the exact number. And so Diane's watching from YouTube. Thank you for remembering to watch from YouTube, Diana, sorry about that. When you are denied parole, is there a right to appeal a negative decision, or is it arbitrary? Also, when you are denied, how long do you have to wait before you can reapply? And this is a great question. So there's a number of answers to that question, because even that is not consistent. They can give you anywhere from a 1-year set off. So it's 1 year from the time that you're denied. And that's what I had. So would go back 1 year, no, go back 1 year, no, go back 1 year. But they can give you a 2-year set off, a 3-year set off, a 4-year set off, Toonche, a 5-year set off. And then, yeah, but wait, there's more.
There's more.
Yeah.
If you have a capital charge, and you have, you're not on death row, you have a sentence or whatever, and those aren't many of folks, but you've waited all this time, and that's years. And guess what you can
Decades.
get?
That's
You
decades.
can get a 10-year set off, right? So that means you've waited all this time to finally see parole, and you've worked hard to do the things that parole or they say that you're supposed to do, and it's like, okay, great. Well, we're going to deny your parole, and we're going to set you off. We're going to put you off to the side for 10 more years.
Mhm.
Lord have mercy.
Mhm.
And then part 2 of that question, or rather part 1, is there a right to appeal? And so, can you talk about that? Do either of you have better? Because my knowledge is jailhouse knowledge. It's what
Yeah.
I witnessed firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect Helen Gabler question. For those who don't know Helen, Helen is an amazing badass. She does the UT Parole Project. But if I think there is technically an appeal, but you can't just. I don't think it's for like if you just don't like that you've been denied. You know what I mean? Like I think there has to be like specific criteria. Like maybe the parole board didn't like they violated the law somehow, right? That would give you grounds to appeal the decision. If there was some error, I guess. But and don't quote me too, but I do know there is, but I don't think it's really all that meaningful. Like it's certainly not like you got denied and you think that was very arbitrary and subjective.
Right.
I'm sure it was, but I don't think that's enough for like them to rehear.
Yeah.
Toonche, I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say, Toonche. You have 20 years under your belt.
And I was a
I have
nerd,
10.
I was a
So
nerd.
30 years combined. And both of us knew a lot of people and helped a lot of people do things like write an appeal or write a grievance, these kind of things. And I just want to know how many people you ever saw.
So what you would call it is a special review. And so a special review is just like Justin said, you've got to be able to show that there was some monumental piece of evidence or something related to your case that was not included, and maybe it has to be new, right? And the other piece is the error. And in 20 years, I knew one person that successfully got a special review, because you have to request it, and it actually worked. And it was a friend of mine that she had a co-defendant that was charged. I believe they had the same crime. I don't remember. There was some discrepancy that the parole board had the wrong information for her co-defendant, so that it looked like that she had less time than her co-defendant. And so they set her off using that as an explanation with her attorney that, she was like, no, my co-defendant is gone. How do they not know that? My co-defendant was here. Right? Like, what is happening? And so they had to get some court documents, and it was just all this whole big thing. And then they were like, you know what? We didn't have that information, and this information was incorrect in her file. And then they gave her, I think she got an FI-1 or 2, and then she was gone. She was also a trustee. And so she had more of the kind of, offenses that they don't feel so nervous about, more nonviolent. And so that is the only time I ever heard anybody's special review actually working. And she had an attorney. So that's part of it too.
She had a Helen Gabler behind the scenes working for her. Lori is asking, do your parole stipulations specifically surrounding bank account, does that vary state to state? And I'll tell you, not only does it vary, not only do parole stipulations vary state to state, They vary person to person. And it's not just a blanket, hey, if you have a theft over 200,000 charge, which was my charge, you're getting this. It's not even that, because I know plenty of other people that have that charge that didn't have my stipulations. It's just whatever. When the parole board votes and grants parole, there's a list of things that they can add on to there. And I just think it's whatever whomever has that paper in front of them says, let's do this, bop, 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 bop. And it doesn't seem to have too much rhyme or reason. And I'll tell you, one of my parole stipulations included an in-prison substance misuse treatment program, and I have zero substance misuse history, legally or personally. So zero. Like when I met my counselor at that program, she asked me, why are you here? Well, ma'am, I don't know, because they made me come, because they handcuffed me and put me on a transport bus and brought me, you know?
Yeah, and Justin, I'm curious, as I know that you've worked with some other groups to collect letters and stories and hearing from especially men, because we work with women and gender expansive people. Like, were these the kind of stories that, you hear them from us, but are these the things that you too have heard, when people have written from the facilities to the organizations you work at?
Yeah. I mean, it was, so we had, when I was at my old organization, I had started this sort of project around, because one of the things I'm trying to do is I work in policy, right? I work at that level, but I'm trying to figure out a way into where it's not so top down type of work, where it's I'm just reading reports and basing policy off of that, but really trying to not just understand what folks who are actually directly impacted are going through, and then also figuring out ways in which we can get those people involved in the policy making process. And so part of that was sending surveys into prisons, which TDCJ, before we were setting this all up, that was before they went all digital. So we had to get real creative on how we sent those surveys in, but we did send surveys in. And one of the questions that I think I had a set of questions I had a really hard time reading was, we asked questions around how denial has impacted not just you, but also impacted your loved ones. Because I'm sure it's not with this crowd, right? But I mean, parole denials have ripple effects that go way beyond just the person who's caged in a prison, right? I mean, there's all kinds of negative impacts related to that. And hearing the frustration in folks of being like, I've been here for however long, I've done XYZ, I put together all of this information in a parole packet, which a lot of them don't feel like actually ever gets really, are people actually reading those? And I'm continuously not being recognized for all of the growth and transformation I have done, despite being in this violent death-making institution, right? But then also hearing stories of folks being like, them losing people because they've been trapped, right? Or having the fear of not being able to be in physical contact with their loved ones, with their moms, right, with their dad, with their family members, because they're going to be stuck here, and they don't know why, right? And I think that's the other insidious nature around parole, is that not only do they just continuously deny your humanity, and then they don't give you any real direction, what you can do. Right? Like what is it that you want to see from me, particularly for those who continue getting denied for things they can't change?
You said that so beautifully. People really do want to know, what do you want from me? I need a goal. Yeah. I need something that will give me hope and give me tangible things that I can work towards. I want to address what Jason's saying, because you touched on that too. But before I do that, I want to just say, I'm eligible for parole, my first parole. I'm an outside trustee. I'm a college student. I've taken so many classes. I've signed up for everything, correspondence, chapel. I have a handful of all these certificates that don't mean jack. Um, and I'm feeling good. My sweet mom, I think it was my mom, called the warden and said, "We're up for parole. What do I do?" And they look her up. They look me up and they are like, "Oh, she's an outside trustee. Oh, yeah, she lives in F dorm. No worries, she goes home. They make parole." Like, and so I remember speaking with my family and they're like, "Oh, you're coming home." My kids thought I was coming home. Everybody thought I was coming home, and then I didn't. And then a year later I didn't. And then a year later I didn't. And every year we have this hope and we're making plans, and the way that ripple effect goes, that it was a lot emotional for my family, and a little financial, but there are families out there, single parents or grandparents raising children that they can't afford or living on Social Security, and they need someone to come home and earn an income to contribute. And instead, tax dollars are paying for this person to be housed. Um, I want to address this parole packets because you said people feel like parole packets or letters, do they even get looked at? Do they even get read? And I always told people my opinion because I don't know. We're not privy to that information. We're not sitting in front of a parole board when these decisions are being made. And that brings me to Shaquille's comment because she asked, like, do they answer you right there? It's not like the scene in Shawshank Redemption where he's Red is sitting in front of the parole board and they're all asking him questions with all of his documents in front of them. That's not what parole in Texas looks like. What parole in Texas looks like happens all behind closed doors. We don't know what they're saying about us. We haven't a clue. They're not asking us any questions. They call us in. A representative who is not a parole board voter calls us in and says, "Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Did you take this class?" "Yes, yes, yes." "Okay. You have 6 weeks to send in your parole packet or support letters." That's what it looks like. And then God bless my family. Someone else asked if it was worth about a parole attorney. I'm not here to make any enemies out of parole attorneys because we know Helen Gabler's team does excellent work and she's in that line of business. But I also know that there are parole attorneys they're manipulating the system and taking money from the most vulnerable population, which are families that are praying for their loved ones to come home.
Thousands of dollars.
Yes.
Thousands of. I had a friend, y'all, that I knew from the nature of her offense and the fact that she had vocal victims. I'm like, girl, you already know that you're not going to go anywhere. And it's hard to like damage somebody's hope, but like when you're saying that your family's fixing to pay an attorney $10,000 to represent you in parole, that the only things that they may have a little bit more access to is trying to get an appointment with an actual member to speak to them. Hopefully, maybe. Right? But like a parole packet, anybody can do. I think you have folks like Helen and her team that, I mean, the representation for a friend of ours that did 30 years and her time was jacked up, and Helen stepped in and really we got her time straightened out, and then she saw parole again, and that was impactful. But it's not, you're not charging family members, like you said, $10,000 to do that. That is a scam. Just like we got good attorneys and bad attorneys out here, some are meaningful and do the work, and then others are vultures, right? They're ambulance chasers or whatever. And it's the same thing for parole attorneys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to really talk to the fact that there is no real transparency in our agency. I mean, I think Marci had mentioned, people they don't even have access to the information that's being used to make these types of critical, I mean, these are impactful decisions. and unfortunately, those decisions are being made by someone in an office reading a case file, that we're fairly certain they don't have the time to really dig into when you're talking about the amount of cases that come through that office. And I mean, I think attorneys, I think that's a very slippery slope. I mean, in some cases it could be helpful because it at least it can get that person in front of a voting member to try and talk a little bit more about who you are as a person. But the way Parole operates, it's a flip of a coin, in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and it's like, well, if I've talked a lot about this feeling. If I just feel like I'm washed away in the system, like I feel like my fate is just kind of out in the ocean, just right, like this. And Marci's right. Like I think this is the huge misconception about people that are incarcerated is that we don't want to be better and that we don't give a fuck and that we are just like whatever. We desperately want to know, what do you want from me? What do you want from me? What do you need from me? What can I do to make this right? And just feeling so completely helpless in that. And let's be clear, when we say the public doesn't understand how this really works, judges and attorneys and DAs don't understand how parole works either. They see that you're eligible. I remember my attorney, y'all, saying, okay, you've got this 12 non-aggravated, meaning you see parole not at half at 6, but like within the year that you get there because you have a year back time. And you do well, Miss Toon. And I looked at him and I said, sir, I'm going to do this almost this whole 12. He said, no, you have this is a non-aggravated 12, Miss Toon. You see parole right when you get there as long as you don't get in trouble. I said, they are going to make me do almost this entire sentence. I have a victim that's angry at me, and I have a history. So I'm done. They're going to make me. He did not understand that or believe me. And I did 10 on a 12 because it's I'm being held accountable to things that I can't change. My previous offense. Wait, how old I was the first offense.
Mm-hmm.
That I can't change. And my youth was being held against me.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my victim. And it turns back into this resentencing thing. And I think there was some ways that victim right groups were hoping that parole could give everybody a 10-year set off, like that the parole would begin to chip away at our actual sentencing and really truly become resentencing.
Yeah, there was I saw some questions and comments and stuff, and I think it was Jason that mentioned some of this, but I think part of the problem with parole is that prosecutors are still involved, the victim's still involved, and as to the influence, I mean, there's a lot of influence, in these processes.
And it's like, and again, I am also very balanced in terms of understanding the rights of victims to be heard and seen and not harmed by the system as well, which I think the system harms them a lot too. And nobody's bringing these groups together to truly have restorative justice happen, right? And you can't force that, but like trying to find another pathway for that. And I think it pits victims against people who have committed crime on purpose, and it doesn't allow for healing. And it makes me feel like, at what point am I no longer my victim's deciding if I make parole? Well, at what point can I get out from underneath that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you harm them, so they get to say forever. Well, no, that's not the way the law actually works. So why is it that they are? It feels like they're deciding parole. I've already been sentenced.
Well, honey, there are people out here that want people like you and I to walk around with our heads down in shame for something we did 15 years ago,
Mhm.
and some folks just have that mentality that they're not looking at anything they've done in the past. But
Mhm.
if you have been convicted, you are the forever felon.
Mhm.
And it's that same thing. They're holding your charge, you know. So yeah, victims play a huge role, and I don't want to like go into huge conversation about this, but
Mhm.
um victims families can write in and reject parole, and also just random members of random people.
Mhm.
And so if you have a random enemy for some other reason, if you've had maybe a relationship breakup or something like that, pettiness can protest as well. And those letters do have a really big impact, I believe.
That go right in your file.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like Justin said, we don't have a right to know what's in our files. That is that's law. I cannot, not even an attorney can get a hold of my file. And the way my friend was able to get a special review is that her attorney at least was trying to have some conversation with parole about trying to figure out something is not right here. And they were able to give just a little bit of information, but they can't show us. I'm like, so wait a minute. You mean to tell me my file could have absolutely crazy random that has nothing to do with my rehabilitation, 50 letters from people I've never met that have just said the most outlandish shit about me and my character and about my rehabilitation, and I'm not allowed to see it.
Mhm.
You're not allowed to defend yourself in any way. My file, in a 10-year time, and y'all know I didn't do my time the easy way. And, it was rough. I had a lot of disciplinary history, but my file, when I would go to UCC, it was a thunk. That's the kind of thing they were throwing down. And so I know that I can't imagine how many pages of I had a complete mental health breakdown in the middle, and there's no telling what kind of things I said that I was even quoted on, probably.
Right.
Or I don't know what's in there, right? I have not.
Boy, I wish I could get my hands on it.
Yeah, yeah. Shaquille also asked, because we've just got about 7 or 8 minutes here, and so I kind of want to walk through what a parole visit looks like and how often. And I'll start with, I've been home. I'm on parole till 2030, and so I I've been on parole now almost 4 years. It's almost my 4-year anniversary for being home. And my last parole visit looked like my PO texting me, "Hey, what's up? You still at the same address? Any
Mhm.
changes? You behaving?" I think that's even why, like, I quoted, "Are you behaving?" "Yes, sir. No changes. All good's here. uh, you know, I have to put in for a travel pass in a couple weeks." "Okay, let me know." So that's our, and that happens, I think, every 3 or 4 months. Um, the parole officer that I had before that, it was phone in like that, but he would call and make me walk to my house number and take a video with me in front of my house number, which, I'm on my family's property, and I have to walk 2 acres to get to where the house number is. So he would wait for me, and it's like, "Okay," have to go way out. But anyways, so that's how that looked. But before that, it started with me going in every month, and they UA'd me every time I went in and, uh, talked with me, and then it went to every other month, and then, gosh, Toonch, I don't know, and then it just dwindled on down to where I don't even go in unless I have to travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, changes in things, right? I mean, I think that illustrates a big piece that needs to be looked at, and that is, when you get on parole, you don't really have any way to get off, right? I mean, in Texas, you can go to a like a non-reporting status, but you don't have it like on probation, at least for some people. Texas love its card. They love carving out folks, but at least for some people on probation, you at least have an avenue to get that probation discharged early. So you don't have to do the full sentence. On parole. That's not right. And so I know one of the things that I'm really interested and would love to see done here, which there is some legislation out there that's trying to do this, is to allow folks to do that, to allow folks on parole to be discharged early. Because if you look at the research, right, I mean, if you look at people who study this, and they're across the board, right, from all types of organizations, most people will tell you any longer than 2, 3, I think I see most 5 years, but really 2 to 3 years, anything after that, sort of diminishing returns. You know, if something's going to happen, again, research studies say that it's usually within that first 2, maybe few years. Anything after that, again, right, if the system's doing what it loves to do, punish, right? And so I know, like, you know, Marci, your story and stories of so many of the people that I hear, particularly on parole, who often have to be on it for decades, some of them their entire lives.
Like Jerry, who's commenting right here. That's why I left her comment up, because she'll be reporting the rest of her life.
And absolutely, there's nothing that says that improves safety or community outcomes or anything. And people on parole, all people on parole, should have a meaningful pathway to get off, to discharge early. So, can age?
Diana's coming in hot because giving us the opportunity to just sneak in MRIS at the end of this conversation. So we do just have a few minutes. Right.
So Texas does have, right, Marci just mentioned MRIS, so that's medically recommended intensive supervision program. And that's like Texas's version of quote unquote compassionate release. So states usually have laws around people who have particularly severe medical issues or mental health issues that sort of allow them a so-called pathway to get released and to get care outside of a prison environment. Unsurprisingly, it is just as awful, just with parole. You know, I mean, imagine how many people are in TDCJ now who are elderly, who are sick. I mean, thousands of folks, right? I think I know, I read a report that talked about how I think there were like at least 800 people who were required like 24-hour, like long-term facility type care. And yet last year, 28 people got released through that program, right? Through that medically recommended intensive supervision program. You know, so I guess technically on paper it's there, but, you know, practically speaking, again, talking about barriers, which often sort of mirror what we've been talking about parole, it's really not a very meaningful pathway for folks. And again, you have the board talking about people who are terminally ill, talking about people who are bedridden, denying them because they're such a public safety threat.
With no medical knowledge, they don't have medical degrees, but looking at people that are medically required to get 24-hour care and deeming them, it sounds like not a public safety issue and just a crime and punishment, very punitive way of looking at it. So we can take some final thoughts because we're here at a minute and a half. Toonche.
Final thoughts, Justin. What is the solution? Give us your most concise, what is the solution? I bet you I know what it is.
And we have to talk about Parole Advocacy Day before, so we might run just a little bit over. Y'all are going to want to hear about this.
The solution is, y'all, we can do better. We can do better than caging people, than arresting and prosecuting and incarcerating. Like we can do better. I mean, I think that's the overall solution, right? We need to be thinking beyond these systems of punishment and what does it really look like to create systems, real, like true, meaningful systems of care, safety, and accountability, right? I mean, I think for parole specifically, I mean, we again, it goes back to discretion. We've got to do something about discretion, and we need presumptive parole in Texas, right? We need, when you hit your parole eligibility date, punishment has been met. Punishment has been met when you hit your first parole eligibility date. And as long as you meet, you know, whatever criteria people will try and, you know, as long as you're release ready, whatever that may mean, however we define that, you're good to go. Right? And do as much as we can to take away the biases that are inherent in all of us, right? But particularly with the parole board when making these types of decisions.
That was what I thought you were going to say.
It's almost like we know. It's almost like we feel the same way.
Well, Justin, it's been a pleasure, and it was a little bit more of a serious or heavier topic. We'll have you back on sometime to talking about, I don't know, fun gay stuff and maybe twerking in the Capitol and I don't know, stuff like that, so that people understand what our days are like, how we find joy. And so, Marci, I want everybody to hear about the Parole Advocacy Day.
Yes, because our soon to have a snazzier name parole working group in Texas, we are organizing a parole advocacy day. It will be Friday, March 7th. Save the date, okay? Because we are like in the beginning stages. We have saved the space at the Capitol. It will be in Austin. Save the date, March 7th. It's going to be education surrounding parole. It's going to be community, because it's us. It's going to be fun and joyful also. A lot of good information, opportunities to do some office visits and ledge work, and also just learn from people that have been doing this for a while, which I always love. It's going to be a lot of fun. So save the date, Friday, March 7th. I did see, and I'll just plug, March 14th in Fort Worth. You can save that date too. The Right Cause Urban Youth Conservation. Sade, I've got you, sis. They're going to be in Fort Worth, and I will be at that event too. You can go to their website. They already have their information out. They're a little bit ahead of the game. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Justin, I always love being in company with you. You are literally one of our favorite people. We say it even when you're not around, sir. We just really appreciate the work that you do, and we just really appreciate you as a person. Thank you for volunteering your time and knowledge and having this conversation with us. And AIC's advocate, thank you for your work in Oregon, sir, and thank you for always reminding me to remind the people. Thank you for liking the live, sharing the live, commenting on the live, all of those good things. If you're listening wherever you hear your favorite podcasters, please do leave us a review. We will be back next week, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Central Time. Catch us on YouTube. We're about to be all over, only YouTube. So make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we will see you all then. I did all that, and I'm not prepared.
Hit the man, you messed up after all that good. Golly, Marci.
Love y'all. Love y'all.
Thank y'all for hanging out with us on the Recyard Women's Prison Podcast with Marci Marie and Toonche. Make sure and subscribe to our channel